Chapter 2, James and Abby. The football went flying towards his head as James stopped to ponder a science question. I can't tell you what it was about because I know nothing about science, with the exception of the rule, what goes up must come down. That is exactly what happened in this football practice. The coach threw the ball and it hit James square in the face. Well, then again, footballs are oval, so it hit James oval in the face. We'll just stick to square because it sounds a lot better. Anyway, James got hit in the face and plummeted toward the ground. That also portrayed my rule from above, what goes up must come down. James scuttled to his feet and looked down. Yuck, a tooth had fallen out. James bent to pick it up and went to hear the coach's complaints. "What were you thinking, Kingston?" Coach barked. "You have to look up to catch the ball. This is the ninth time this week that you haven't been paying attention." All the other boys chortled behind their hands. "Sorry, Coach. I was thinking about a science question. Problem 44. Is it possible to create wormholes or portals to other worlds?" James explained. "I think it's a matter of opinion, but, scientists these days always come up with a new theory." The coach actually growled at this. "Kingston, we aren't the science club. If you like science stuff so much, go and join the scientists. You'll have plenty of time for it. You are suspended from the team for 4 weeks. James was shocked. How could he be suspended from the team? He was their best player. What would they do in the big Thanksgiving game without him? There was only one thing to do. Find Rosie Stone and get his revenge. Abby Gale wasn't having any better of a day. In fact, it might have been worse. She couldn't decide whether to fry her teacher or roast her. Either way would be simply divine. The deliciousness of Mrs. Rotten Candy would soon be... Oops, wrong story again. As I said before, nothing too bad happens to anyone. Anyway, Abby was having a horrible day because her advice column in the paper had been totally wrecked because Jeff came in and he'd seen who was running the column when it was supposed to be a secret. What if he told? No one would want to tell her their problems anymore. Her dreams of being like Oprah were dwindling. The horror, the horror. Yes, I did just repeat myself. Get over it. Abby had to find Jeff and make him swear not to tell any person on this earth that she was Abby of Dear Abby. She rushed down the halls of the school, looking to see if Jeff was still there. When you run fast, looking for something or someone, you rarely notice anything or anyone. This is precisely what happened to Abby. She was running so fast that she didn't see James running quickly at her. James went into the school to see if he could find Rosie, because she had been interviewing him in science, causing him to miss question 44. So now he had a bone to pick with her, because she got him suspended from the football team. As he rushed through the school, he didn't notice Abby rushing towards him, because as I explained before, you can't see too well when you're rushing through the halls of your school. Since James couldn't see Abby running at him, and Abby couldn't see James running towards her, the two applied the law of gravity that I explained earlier. Since those two were standing up, those two must be knocked down. It's really quite simple. I just can't believe you can't remember it. So James collided with Abby, and Abby collided with James. Ouch. When the two arose, they were even angrier than they had been, which might not even be possible. "Why did you run into me?" the two said at the same time. "I didn't run into you. You ran into me." Again, they said it at the same time. "No," same time. "I," same time. "Hey," this was becoming comical. "Listen," wow, same exact time. "Stop it," finally James said it this time. "Stop saying the same thing as me at the same time. I'm looking for Rosie Stone. She works on the paper with you, right?" Abby nodded. "She does." "I have a bone to pick with her," the muscular child growled. "I'm busy looking for Jeff, that guy whose desk you sit on all the time. I need to find him before..." Abby paused. James looked quizzically at her. "Before what?" "Something bad happens?" "Well, I saw Jeff hanging around Rosie. Maybe they're at one of their houses. We can go together and pick their bones at the same time," James concluded sensibly. So the two enraged children stomped to Jeff's house. Then, upon finding the other two children not there, the two left for Rosie's apartment building. They found them there, watching the news. The two seething kids rejoiced at their find. After the rejoicing stopped, they got all malicious and impolite to Jeff and Rosie. "How could you get me suspended from the football team and not know what I'm talking about?" James said midway into the conversation, although he was beginning to understand that Rosie had unintentionally got him suspended. But he couldn't lighten up now that he was angry. "And you, Jeffrey, if that is your real name, how could you not have seen me reading people's problems? It was right in front of you." Jeff looked at Rosie, and Rosie looked at Jeff. Very suspicious, if you ask me, but of course they didn't ask me. I am, after all, only the author. Later, after a whole lot of arguing you don't want to hear, all four children had somehow ended up at James' house. I believe they got there like this. Jeff started fighting with Abby, and James with Rosie, but Mr. Stone got a headache and told them to play outside, so they all went outside and started walking around. Then suddenly, James suggested they go to his house because his mom had made apple pie. After that, they all stopped arguing because Mrs. Kingston's delicious pie was in their mouths. The pie was so yummy, it caused them to chat good-naturedly with each other and become friends. It must have been some good pie. The quartet went outside and sat on the lush grass of the Kingston lawn. The neighbors, the next-door lady in particular, all looked skeptically at them through their windows because the children talked and laughed so much. The kids had a great time until James's grandfather emerged from the old outhouse in the corner of the yard. The smell that emanated from the small structure could have killed an elephant. It stank so bad that the kids had to hold their noses in hope that they wouldn't lose their sense of smell altogether. "Must been those beans I had for lunch. I've been in that hut for about an hour," Grandpa said, walking inside. The four children on the lawn groaned and ran to close the outhouse door. Whew! The outhouse would bother them no longer. The children started to giggle at the horrid smell. I don't get what's so funny about almost losing your sense of smell, but these kids are quite odd. "Wow, that is one putrid smell," James said. "Ugh, I can barely breathe," Jeff gasped. "Why does your grandfather even have an outhouse?" Abby moaned.
"Because he thinks that indoor plumbing is too newfangled, and it was good enough for the people when I was a boy,"
James mocked while holding his nose.
"I know it's odd, but Mom thinks that since it was his house to begin with, he should get to do his, business where he pleases."
I'm going to stop writing about this rancid smell and skip to what happened next. The four kids started to play ball in James' smelly backyard. It was so fun, they hardly noticed when the yard started to smell bad again. I have promised you I will not go into that, so the smells mentioned stops here. The long afternoon had the children worn out by the time they had to go home. That night, their parents rejoiced because the kids slept like rocks. In the morning, James met Abby, Jeff, and Rosie before school. "Hey, do you guys want to come over to my house again after school?" James asked. "Yeah, sure," was the collective reply. "Cool, meet you there," James said, leaving for his first class, with Jeff trailing behind. In school, James was caught off guard by his first class. His science teacher told his class that the biannual science fair was happening in 2 weeks. James hadn't even begun to think of a project. What was he going to do? Then he had an idea, a brilliant idea, an idea that this whole story is modeled upon. The only questions he had for his teacher were these. "Can I work with partners?" "Yes, James, as long as at least one of them does this class with you. You know, so someone else on your team knows what you've been studying as well," the teacher explained. "And also, Mr. Smellfoot, what is the correct answer to problem 44? From the practice we did yesterday?" James nodded. "Well, Mr. Kingston, I believe the answer to that problem is yes. I have always believed that travel to an alternate world is possible with the right equipment, the right people, and imagination." "Thank you, Mr. Smellfoot," James grinned. Now, you and I know that no real science teacher would ever tell a kid to imagine something. But Mr. Smellfoot was no ordinary science teacher. Mr. Smellfoot was a science teacher who had also been a substitute creative writing teacher, and so he learned that anything is possible with a little imagination. He learned this lesson as Chad, the creative writing bully, had stuffed a pencil up Mr. Smellfoot's nose. James went home happy and started his science fair project. The frame of the thing was done, as were the blueprints. Now he just needed to have a little help from his friends. Until then, he decided to hide the thing in the most unusual of places. Later, at James' house, the four friends sat on the lawn chatting. The girls were talking about something in the newspaper, and Jeff tried to get James to talk about some story he had read earlier. James didn't really listen to any of it, mostly because he was trying to get his own 2 cents in. That means he was trying to tell them something himself, but the others were busy putting in at least 10 cents. A loud rupture caused them all to stop talking and stare at the outhouse. "What was that?" Abby demanded. "I don't know. Whatever it is came from the outhouse," James said with a mysterious smirk. The other 3 kids snuck over to the outhouse to see what had made the loud noise. James remained seated on the grass, snickering silently. You, dear reader, may be expecting that it was the grandfather of James that caused the loud noise of the outhouse. But you, reader, are wrong. It was not a gas leak from the grandpa that caused this boom in the outhouse, but a machine frame. The kids saw this as James pried the walls off the old privy. The kids gasped and asked about a million questions at once, mainly, "What is it?" and "How did it make that noise?" James shushed them with a wave of his hands. "Come on, people, not so many questions at once. This is what I like to call the MTM. The rest of the kids looked just as confused as they had before. Then James explained, "Magical, even though it's not magic, transport machine." The kids appeared to be perplexed, so James continued, "When it's finished, it should be able to take us to a different world, and it probably just made that noise because I left it turned on." As the gang grasped this information, they all started to talk again. "You mean we can go to a different world? How's that possible? When will it be finished?" Blah, blah, blah. They were really enthusiastic. James did his best to explain everything, but the questions were too many. It'll be finished sooner if you help me with it, and I really need you guys' help." The question stopped for a second, but then everyone wanted to know how they could help. "Well, Jeff has 2 jobs. First, he needs to stay in science class with me so that I can have you guys' help. Secondly, Jeff needs to not lose his memory of fairy tales. We'll need that. Abby needs to get us some costumes. Your mom owns that medieval-themed restaurant, right?" Abby nodded. Her mother owned the coolest restaurant ever. It had waitresses dressed as damsels and waiters dressed as pages, not the paper kind, the medieval kind. "Good. We'll need you to get us some old costumes that your mom doesn't need anymore. Rosie, you have one of the most important jobs. You have helped your dad fix his car wash before, and I will need that mechanical help because I have no idea how tools work." James' friends nodded and smiled. They got to help build one of the most amazing machines of all time. The kids could not wait. Before, I told you that this wasn't a story about kids who go on a cutesy adventure. It still isn't. Don't worry, all you dark readers, it won't get cute, just like I promised. But I didn't promise that I wouldn't add more characters.
And that's chapter 2. Okay, bye.